On a scorching afternoon in Boston's wealthiest district, an elderly woman in tattered clothing approached a young waitress at Café Lumineux and asked for a simple cup of water. Maya Torres, despite her manager's sharp disapproval and the visible disgust of wealthy patrons sipping champagne at nearby tables, brought the woman ice water and invited her to rest in the shade. The old woman, trembling with gratitude at this small act of kindness shown by a stranger who had nothing to gain, offered to sing as thanks. What followed stunned everyone within earshot. A voice of impossible beauty emerged, trained and magnificent, soaring through a Puccini aria with world-class perfection. Maya had no idea that this frail stranger was Eleanor Hartwell, the legendary soprano who had vanished from the opera world 20 years earlier, now traveling in disguise to find the one thing her immense fortune could never buy: proof that genuine human kindness still existed in the world. The summer sun beat down on Newbury Street like a hammer against an anvil, turning Boston's most affluent district into a shimmering mirage of heat and desperation. Wealthy shoppers darted from one air-conditioned boutique to another, their designer shopping bags clutched close, their faces pinched with irritation at the inconvenience of the weather. They complained about the humidity ruining their hair, about the heat making their luxury vehicles unbearable for the 30-second walk from valet to storefront. But for the workers, the heat was not an inconvenience. It was a trial by fire. Maya Torres moved through the outdoor patio of Café Lumineux with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to carry exhaustion like a second skin. At 26 years old, she was already intimately familiar with the weight of impossible choices. The rent was 3 weeks overdue. Her mother's medical bills sat in an accusatory pile on the kitchen counter, their red stamps screaming final notice. Maya was working her second double shift this week, and her feet ached with a deep, bone-level pain that no amount of rest could ease. Yet she moved with quiet dignity, her spine straight, her smile genuine even when her body begged for mercy. The cafe itself was a theater of privilege, all gleaming chrome and pristine white umbrellas, where a single cup of coffee cost more than Maya made in an hour. The customers were demanding, snapping their fingers for service, complaining that their water wasn't cold enough, that their table had too much sun or too little shade. Gerald, the manager, prowled the patio like a nervous cat, his face perpetually tight with the anxiety of maintaining appearances. Everything had to be perfect. Every guest had to feel they were receiving service worthy of the prices they paid. The heat made everyone irritable, customers and staff alike, turning small inconveniences into dramatic affronts. Maya refilled water glasses, delivered overpriced salads, and absorbed complaints with patient grace. Then, through the shimmer of heat rising from the pavement, she noticed an elderly woman approaching on the sidewalk. The woman moved slowly, as if each step required careful consideration. Her clothing was worn, faded, patched in places. In this neighborhood of designer labels and casual wealth, she stood out like a single gray thread in a tapestry of gold. Maya watched her approach, something in her chest tightening with recognition. Not of the woman herself, but of the expression she wore. Need. Simple, undeniable need. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. The old woman reached the edge of the cafe's outdoor patio, and the reaction was immediate. Customers visibly recoiled, their eyes sliding away as if refusing to acknowledge her existence. A man in an expensive suit shifted his chair slightly, creating more distance. A woman clutched her purse closer, her diamonds catching the harsh sunlight. The elderly woman was painfully thin, her gray hair escaping in wisps from beneath a faded floral scarf that had perhaps once been beautiful, but now spoke only of decades past. Her dress was patched at the elbows and hem, the fabric worn so thin in places it was nearly translucent. But it was clean. Despite everything, it was clean. She approached Maya with trembling hands, her fingers gnarled with age and hardship. Her voice, when she spoke, was hoarse from the heat and thirst. "Excuse me, dear. Might I have a cup of water?" Just water. I have been walking all morning." The words were simple, but there was something in the way she spoke them, a refinement beneath the roughness, like old silk beneath dust. Around them, customers began to whisper. A woman in pearls leaned toward her companion, her voice deliberately loud enough to carry. "Unbelievable. Can't they go somewhere else?" Before Maya could respond, Gerald materialized at her elbow, his fingers closing around her arm with barely concealed urgency. He pulled her aside, his voice a harsh whisper. "Send her away. Now. Look at her. She will drive away our clientele. We cannot have people like that loitering here. It is bad for business." Maya looked back at the old woman, who stood patiently, her hands still trembling slightly. And in that moment, Maya saw something unexpected in the woman's eyes. Not defeat, not the dull resignation of someone accustomed to rejection, but something else. A searching quality. Alert. Observant. As if she was testing something, measuring something invisible. As if this moment mattered in ways Maya could not yet understand. Maya thought of her own mother, bedridden and vulnerable. She thought of her own exhaustion, her own needs that went unmet while she served others. She thought of how easily she could become invisible, how close she always was to being the person everyone looked away from. Gerald's warning hung in the air between them. This could cost her the job she desperately needed. But some choices transcend consequences. Some moments demand that we decide who we truly are. Maya pulled her arm free from Gerald's grip, turned, and walked deliberately to the service station. She filled a large glass with ice water, the cubes crackling as cold met heat. She wrapped a clean linen napkin around it and carried it back to the old woman, her steps certain despite her racing heart. Maya did not simply hand the woman the water and retreat to safety. As she approached, she noticed the elderly stranger swaying slightly on her feet, her face flushed from the oppressive heat, her breathing shallow. The woman was clearly exhausted, perhaps dangerously so. Without hesitation, Maya did something that went directly against cafe policy. She pulled out one of the cushioned chairs at a shaded patio table, positioning it carefully to catch the maximum relief from the umbrella's protection. She gestured to it with genuine warmth. "Please, rest for a moment. It is far too hot to be walking in this weather." The old woman's eyes filled instantly with tears. For a long moment she simply stood there, staring at the offered chair as if it were something precious and fragile, something she had no right to touch. Then, moving with careful dignity, she lowered herself into the seat as if unused to such treatment, as if kindness itself had become foreign to her. She took the glass of water with both hands, steadying it, and drank slowly, savoring each sip as though it were the finest wine. Maya watched her for a moment, concern etched in the lines around her eyes, before returning to her other tables. A businessman needed his check. The couple at table 7 wanted more bread, but Maya kept glancing back toward the old woman, unable to shake the worry that lodged itself in her chest. Inside the cafe, visible through the glass doors, Gerald was fuming. His face had gone red, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. But he could not make a scene in front of the customers, could not be seen physically removing an elderly woman from the premises. He was trapped by the very decorum he demanded, forced to watch as Maya violated his direct orders. The wealthy patrons watched with varied reactions. Some refused to look, turning their bodies away as if proximity to poverty might somehow contaminate them. Others watched with uncomfortable curiosity, perhaps recognizing in themselves the instinct to look away, feeling the weight of their own inaction. The woman in pearls, her neck draped with stones that could have paid Maya's rent for a year, made a loud comment to her lunch companion, her voice dripping with disdain. "Honestly, this neighborhood is being ruined by vagrants. Next thing you know, they will all be coming here expecting handouts. It is absolutely disgraceful." The old woman heard every word. Maya saw the moment of impact, saw how the woman's hands tightened just slightly on the glass, her knuckles whitening. But her face showed no reaction. No anger, no shame, no hurt. She simply continued to drink her water with slow, measured sips, her gaze focused on something distant, as if she had learned long ago to let such cruelty wash over her without leaving marks. After finishing the water, the old woman set down the empty glass with careful precision and gestured for Maya to approach. Maya came quickly, concerned that something was wrong, but when the woman spoke, her voice was stronger now, the hoarseness burned away by hydration and rest. Beneath it, Maya could hear something unexpected, a refinement, a cultured elegance that seemed incongruous with the patched dress and worn scarf. "You have shown me kindness when no one else would," the woman said, her words precise and measured. "I have no money to repay you, but I would like to offer you something else. Would you permit me to sing for you? One song, as thanks." Maya blinked, surprised by the unexpected offer but deeply touched by the gesture. "Oh, you do not need to do anything," she began. But Gerald, who had been hovering nearby and overheard the exchange, nearly rushed forward to prevent what he clearly saw as an impending disaster. Yet something stopped him mid-stride. Something in the old woman's bearing, in the way she held herself, gave him pause. It was as if a mask had shifted, revealing something beneath that commanded attention despite all appearances. Around the patio, other customers began to whisper and laugh quietly, nudging each other with barely concealed amusement. They expected entertainment at a homeless woman's expense, a spectacle to add flavor to their expensive lunches. The woman in pearls leaned back in her chair, a cruel smirk playing across her carefully painted lips. "Oh, this should be amusing," she announced to the patio at large, her tone dripping with anticipation of mockery to come. Maya saw the gathering cruelty, felt it like a physical presence, and something fierce and protective rose in her chest. She turned back to the old woman, her voice gentle but urgent. "You truly do not have to do anything, please." The water was freely given. But the old woman smiled then, a mysterious, knowing smile that seemed to carry decades of secrets. Her eyes held something ancient and amused, as if she understood a joke that no one else could yet perceive. "Oh, but I want to," she said softly, that refined accent growing stronger with each word. "I insist." She rose slowly from her chair, her movements deliberate and controlled. And in that rising, something remarkable happened. Despite the shabby appearance, despite the threadbare dress and faded scarf, there was suddenly something commanding about her posture. Her spine straightened, her shoulders settled back, her chin lifted with quiet authority. The transformation was subtle but undeniable, like watching a queen emerge from beneath a beggar's disguise. The old woman moved to a clear space on the patio, stepping away from the table with movements that suddenly seemed less frail, more purposeful. The lunchtime chatter died down gradually as people turned to watch, most with barely concealed amusement plastered across their faces. This would be a story to tell at dinner parties, a strange encounter with a delusional vagrant who thought she could sing. The woman stood very still for a moment, her eyes scanning the audience with calm assessment. And then she closed them. She took a deep breath, her thin chest expanding, her shoulders settling, and in that breath, Maya saw decades of training, of discipline, of something profound and practiced. Then she opened her mouth. What emerged was impossible. The voice that flowed forth was pure, powerful, achingly beautiful. A trained soprano of the highest caliber, the kind of instrument that should have been gracing the greatest opera houses in the world. She sang O mio babbino caro, the famous aria from Puccini's Gianni Schicchi, and the transformation was complete and total. No longer did anyone see a frail, homeless woman in tattered clothing. They heard only the voice, rich and perfectly controlled, soaring effortlessly through the most challenging passages with technique that spoke of decades at the pinnacle of the art form. The sound was crystalline and warm simultaneously, each note placed with surgical precision yet flowing with deep emotion that seemed to reach into the chest and squeeze the heart. The bustling street seemed to fall silent, as if the city itself had stopped to listen. Pedestrians on the sidewalk stopped walking mid-stride, their heads turning toward the source of that impossible beauty. Customers at the cafe froze with forks halfway to their mouths, salads forgotten, conversations abandoned. Gerald stood absolutely motionless near the cafe entrance, his mouth hanging open, all his fury and disapproval evaporated in an instant. Even the woman in pearls had gone deathly pale, her champagne glass forgotten in her hand, condensation dripping unnoticed onto her expensive dress. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, hot and unstoppable, though she could not have said exactly why she was crying. Perhaps it was the beauty of the voice itself, or perhaps it was the profound sadness of realizing that this magnificent artist had been invisible to everyone. Dismissed and mocked, her true worth hidden beneath poverty's disguise. When the final note faded into the scorching afternoon air, there was a moment of absolute, breathless silence. It stretched for what felt like an eternity. A suspended moment where the world itself seemed to hold its breath in reverence for what it had just witnessed. Then, the patio erupted. Applause thundered from every direction, people rising to their feet as if pulled by invisible strings, their hands coming together in frantic appreciation. People from inside the cafe rushed out through the glass doors, drawn by the commotion, demanding to know what they had missed. Pedestrians on the street burst into spontaneous cheers, some wiping tears from their eyes, others simply staring in disbelief. Cell phones emerged from pockets and purses as people scrambled to record videos, to capture some evidence of what they had just witnessed. Though most had missed the performance itself and could only film the aftermath, the old woman opened her eyes slowly, seeming to return from somewhere very far away. From whatever distant place great artists go when they inhabit their art completely. She looked directly at Maya, and in her gaze was something profound and grateful, something that transcended words. She gave a small, graceful bow, the gesture carrying the elegance of 1,000 curtain calls on the world's greatest stages. "Thank you for the water, child," she said simply, her voice quiet but clear beneath the chaos. Before anyone could stop her, before the spell could fully break, she turned and began walking away down the street, moving with surprising speed for someone who had seemed so frail just moments before. Maya, still in shock with tears still wet on her cheeks, took an instinctive step forward, wanting desperately to stop her, to ask who she was, to understand what had just happened. But Gerald grabbed her arm roughly, his fingers digging into her skin as he shouted over the chaos. "Maya! Table 4 needs you! Table 7 wants to know what just happened! Get back to work!" Customers were calling for her from every direction, waving their hands, demanding information, wanting to be part of the story. The woman in pearls was on her phone, her earlier mockery completely forgotten, her voice shrill with excitement as she described what had happened to someone on the other end. "You would not believe it. This homeless woman just sang like she was at the Metropolitan Opera. It was absolutely incredible." Someone shouted above the din. "Does anyone know who that was? Did anyone recognize her?" But the old woman had already disappeared around the corner, swallowed by the city, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew exactly how to vanish. Maya stared after her, her heart still racing, knowing she had just witnessed something extraordinary but unable to fully comprehend what it meant. Within hours, the videos were everywhere. Multiple angles of the performance flooded social media platforms, each capturing different moments of that impossible voice emerging from an unlikely source. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all carried the same stunning footage, shared and reshared until the numbers climbed into the millions. The hashtag mystery opera singer began trending nationally by early evening, climbing steadily toward the top of every platform. News outlets picked up the story with breathless headlines. "Homeless woman stuns cafe with world-class opera performance." "Mystery singer brings Boston street to standstill." "Who is the vagrant virtuoso?" Television stations ran the footage on their evening broadcasts, the anchors shaking their heads in amazement. Music experts weighed in from conservatories and opera houses across the country, analyzing the technique with professional scrutiny, debating her possible identity with increasing fervor. A professor from the Boston Conservatory appeared on the local news, his face serious and thoughtful. "That is professional training," he said carefully, his words measured. "Decades of it. That level of breath control, that placement, that expression, that is not amateur, that is world-class. Whoever she is, she has performed on major stages. I would stake my reputation on it." Maya's phone exploded with messages. Friends from high school she had not spoken to in years sent her the videos, exclaiming over the coincidence. She's at your cafe! Oh my God! Were you there?" In several of the videos, Maya herself was visible in the background or at the edge of the frame, tears streaming down her face, her expression a mixture of shock and profound emotion. Reporters began calling the cafe before the dinner shift even started, requesting interviews, asking for any information about the mysterious singer. Gerald, who had been furious just hours earlier, suddenly became friendly, his anger evaporating in the face of opportunity. He pulled Maya aside with an oily smile. "You should speak to the press," he suggested, his tone encouraging. "This is excellent publicity for the cafe. And for you, of course. You could become famous from this." But Maya felt deeply uneasy about profiting from the encounter, about turning that moment of simple human kindness into a media spectacle. She could not stop thinking about the old woman's eyes, about that searching quality she had seen there, as if the woman had been testing something fundamental about humanity itself. That night, exhausted from her shift but unable to sleep, Maya sat in her small apartment while her mother dozed fitfully in the next room. She searched online for any clue about the singer's identity, scrolling through forums and comment sections, reading theories and speculation. But there was nothing concrete. No name emerged. No one recognized her. The woman remained a complete mystery. A ghost who had appeared, stunned the world, and vanished without a trace. The story refused to die. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing day, taking on a life of its own as the internet obsessed over the mystery. On the second day after the performance, a prominent opera critic named Harrison Webb published an article in Opera Today that sent shockwaves through the classical music community. "I have heard that voice before," he wrote, his words careful but certain. "Years ago, at the Metropolitan Opera, I cannot place when exactly or in which production, but I know that voice the way a sailor knows the North Star. It is unmistakable, but it is impossible. The singer I am thinking of has been gone for 20 years. The article sparked a frenzy of speculation that made the initial viral moment seem tame by comparison. Music forums lit up with theories, amateur detectives comparing vocal recordings, analyzing technique frame by frame. Some suggested it was an elaborate publicity stunt, a marketing campaign for an upcoming production or recording. Others claimed it was a fallen star, a tragic story of lost fame and descent into poverty, the kind of cautionary tale that both horrified and fascinated people. Maya, working her shift the next day in a cafe that had suddenly become something of a pilgrimage site for the curious, was approached by a reporter from the Boston Globe. The woman was in her 40s, with intelligent eyes and an air of determination tempered by genuine warmth. She introduced herself as Catherine Morrison and asked if they could speak privately for a moment. Maya, wary but curious, agreed during her break. "I am trying to find her," Catherine explained, leaning forward with earnest intensity. "Not for a sensational story, not to exploit her or turn her into a circus act, but because that voice, someone that talented, deserves to be recognized. To get help if she needs it. If she is truly homeless, truly struggling, then she should not have to suffer when she has given so much beauty to the world." She asked Maya if the woman had said anything, given any hint of her identity, any clue that might help track her down. Maya described the encounter carefully, choosing her words with precision. She mentioned the refinement in the woman's speech, the cultured accent that lurked beneath the hoarseness, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity despite her circumstances. "There was something about her," Maya said slowly, trying to capture the ineffable quality she had sensed. Like she was testing something, like the kindness mattered more than the water itself. Catherine took notes, her eyes thoughtful and focused, nodding occasionally. Before leaving, she pulled out a business card and pressed it into Maya's hand. "If she comes back," Catherine said quietly, "please call me. I promise I will treat her story with respect." The truth was this. The old woman was Eleanor Hartwell, once the most celebrated soprano of her generation, a name that had made the classical music world tremble with reverence and awe. 20 years ago, she had been at the absolute height of her career. performing to sold-out audiences at La Scala in Milan, the Metropolitan Opera in New York, Covent Garden in London. Reviewers had called her voice a gift from the divine, comparing her to the legendary Maria Callas, saying she possessed an instrument that came along once in a century. She had wealth beyond measure, fame that followed her like a second shadow, and the adoration of millions who would have given anything simply to hear her sing. But she also had profound, crushing loneliness that grew heavier with each standing ovation. Her husband, Thomas, had been the only person who loved her before fame found her, who had known Eleanor the woman rather than Eleanor the voice. He had been a high school music teacher, kind and steady, who saw past the extraordinary gift to the person beneath. When he died suddenly of a heart attack at the age of 52, collapsing in their garden on a spring morning, something fundamental broke inside Eleanor. Without him, every standing ovation felt hollow. Every bouquet of roses felt like a burden. Every 5-star review felt like a mockery of what truly mattered. She realized with growing horror that she was surrounded by people who wanted something from her: her voice, her fame, her money, her reflected glory, but no one who simply wanted her. Eleanor, the woman who grieved and ached and needed someone to see her as human. The grief and isolation became unbearable, a weight that pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe between performances. She began to question everything she had built, everything she had achieved. Did real kindness still exist in the world? Would anyone help her if she was nobody? If she had nothing to offer in return? Would anyone see her humanity if it was not wrapped in silk gowns and spotlights? The questions haunted her through curtain calls and champagne receptions, through interviews and photo shoots, through the endless performance of being Eleanor Hartwell the legend. One night after a triumphant performance of La Traviata at the Metropolitan Opera, standing in her dressing room surrounded by flowers and congratulations, looking at her reflection in the mirror and seeing a stranger, Eleanor Hartwell made a decision that would shock the world and change her life forever. Eleanor walked away from it all. She liquidated most of her assets quietly through lawyers and financial advisors who thought she had lost her mind, setting up anonymous trusts for various charities, music scholarships for poor children, and funds for struggling artists. She kept enough to survive modestly, nothing more. And then she disappeared. The media exploded with theories, each more sensational than the last: kidnapping, suicide, mental breakdown, amnesia, foul play. Her face appeared on news broadcasts around the world, her agent pleading for information, police investigating every lead. Her agent received a single letter, postmarked from nowhere identifiable, containing only one sentence written in Eleanor's elegant script: "I need to find something I lost. Do not look for me." For 20 years, Eleanor has been traveling, drifting from city to city, town to town. Always in disguise, always poor in appearance. She wears second-hand clothing from thrift stores, lets her famous golden hair grow gray and unkempt, walks instead of riding in limousines. She goes to different places, approaching people when she is thirsty, hungry, or in need, asking for simple things: water, food, a place to rest. She is testing humanity, searching desperately for proof that goodness exists independent of gain, that kindness can be offered without expectation of reward or recognition. Most people fail her test. They ignore her, their eyes sliding past as if she is invisible, as if poverty has rendered her less than human. They insult her, calling her lazy, telling her to get a job, accusing her of being a drunk or an addict. They chase her away from storefronts and restaurants, threatening to call the police if she does not leave immediately. She has been spit on in Atlanta. She has been called vile names in Chicago. She has had doors slammed in her face in Philadelphia, Seattle, Denver, Nashville. Each rejection hardens something in her heart, each act of cruelty adding another layer of protective ice around the wound that Thomas's death created. She has nearly given up hope, nearly convinced herself that the kindness she remembers from her early life was an illusion, that humanity has lost whatever goodness it once possessed. Then she arrived in Boston on that scorching summer day, dehydrated and exhausted, and approached a tired young waitress who had every reason to turn her away. Maya's kindness, simple and genuine and asking nothing in return, cracked something open inside Eleanor that she thought had calcified beyond repair. The performance was not planned, not calculated. It was pure gratitude. An irresistible impulse to give something beautiful in return for something precious. To prove that she had seen the gift for what it truly was. Catherine Morrison became obsessed with finding the mystery singer. She was a journalist, yes, trained to chase stories and uncover truth, but she was also a woman who recognized something profoundly important when she saw it. Something that transcended mere news cycles and viral moments. She began investigating systematically, pulling up databases of missing persons from the opera world, cross-referencing names with the timeline and what she knew about the voice. She contacted retired musicians, opera house administrators, voice teachers, anyone who might have information about sopranos who had disappeared from the classical music scene over the past 3 decades. She listened to hundreds of recordings, comparing vocal signatures, looking for matches. Meanwhile, Maya could not forget the encounter. The memory of that voice, of those searching eyes, haunted her through every shift, every meal, every quiet moment. She found herself looking for the old woman on her walks home from the cafe, scanning faces in crowds with desperate hope, checking doorways and park benches where someone might rest. Her mother, Rita, noticed her distraction immediately. Rita had been a vibrant woman once, a high school English teacher who loved opera with passionate devotion, but illness had confined her to bed for the past 2 years, her world shrinking to the size of their small apartment. When Maya finally explained what had happened, describing the encounter in careful detail, Rita grew very quiet, her thin fingers clutching the blanket. "Describe her voice again," she whispered, her eyes suddenly alert and focused in a way Maya had not seen in months. Maya tried, struggling to find words adequate to capture that impossible beauty, that perfect control, the way the sound seemed to reach into the chest and rearrange something fundamental. Rita's breathing quickened. She reached with trembling hands for an old cardboard box stored under her bed, pulling it out with Maya's help. Dust rising in clouds. Inside were cassette tapes and old compact discs, a collection from her teaching days. "There was a singer," Rita said, her voice growing stronger with memory. 20 years ago, Eleanor Hartwell. She was magnificent, the greatest soprano of her generation. She vanished without explanation. People said she died, that she must have died, because why else would someone walk away from such glory? Rita's hands shook as she found a particular disc, as Maya helped her place it in the old player. But if she did not die? If she simply disappeared? The recording began to play, and the voice that filled their small apartment was unmistakable, identical, the same instrument that had stopped traffic on Newbury Street. Maya's hands began to shake violently, her breath catching in her throat. "That is her," she whispered, tears already forming. "That is exactly her." Maya called Catherine immediately, her fingers fumbling with the phone, her voice shaking as she explained what her mother had remembered and what they had just heard. Catherine arrived within an hour, bringing a laptop and a thick folder of research notes, moving with the urgency of someone who knows they are close to solving a mystery that matters. Together with Rita, who had rallied with a burst of energy born from purpose, they pieced together the puzzle like archaeologists assembling fragments of something precious and lost. The timeline fit perfectly. Eleanor Hartwell had disappeared 20 years ago, at the age of 53. She would be 73 now, exactly the age of the woman who had asked for water. The voice matched, not just in quality but in specific characteristics. The particular vibrato, the unique timbre that voice recognition software could confirm, was identical. Catherine spread printouts across Rita's bed. Articles from opera magazines, reviews from legendary performances, photographs of a younger Eleanor in elaborate costumes, her face radiant under stage lights. She had uncovered Eleanor's entire history through painstaking research, the stellar career that had taken her to every major opera house in the world, the husband's sudden death that had devastated her, the abrupt disappearance that had shocked the classical music world. But there was something else, something that made all 3 women go still with recognition. Catherine had found an interview given just 6 months before Eleanor vanished, published in a small arts magazine. The interviewer had asked what she valued most in life, expecting answers about music or art or legacy. Eleanor had paused for a long time before answering. "Real kindness," she had said finally. "Not the kind that wants something back, not the kind performed for an audience or for social credit, just goodness for its own sake. Human compassion offered freely to another human being. I wonder sometimes if it still exists in this world, or if we have all become too transactional, too calculating." The women sat in silence as the weight of understanding dawned on them, like sunrise breaking over dark water. Rita spoke first, her voice soft but certain. "She has been searching," she said, her thin hand reaching for Maya's. "All these years, all this time, she has been searching for proof that kindness is real, that humanity still possesses genuine goodness." Maya felt tears welling up, spilling over, running hot down her cheeks. She had given the woman water without a single thought of reward or recognition, without knowing who she was, without expecting anything in return. She had simply seen another human being in need and responded with instinctive compassion. And somehow, that simple act, that unremarkable gesture that had seemed like nothing at all, had meant everything. Catherine faced a choice that would define not just her career but her character. She had the story of the decade sitting in her lap, fully researched and verified. The legendary Eleanor Hartwell, alive, homeless by choice, testing humanity's kindness in the most extraordinary social experiment imaginable. Publishing it would make Catherine's career, would guarantee her a Pulitzer nomination, would open doors that most journalists could only dream of walking through. But publishing it would also destroy Eleanor's mission completely and violate her privacy in the most profound way possible. The woman obviously did not want to be found, had gone to extraordinary lengths to disappear, had sacrificed everything for this search. What right did Catherine have to end it? Maya was torn as well, feeling the weight of conflicting desires pulling her in opposite directions. Part of her desperately wanted Eleanor to come back, to have her fame and comfort restored, to live in safety and recognition rather than vulnerability and obscurity. It seemed wrong that someone so talented should suffer, that someone who had given so much beauty to the world should walk alone through indifferent cities. But another part of Maya understood something deeper. Eleanor was on a spiritual journey, seeking something infinitely more valuable than wealth or recognition or comfort. She was searching for proof of humanity's goodness, for evidence that compassion still existed. To drag her back to her old life would be to invalidate that search, to dismiss the profound question she was trying to answer. That night, the three women sat together in Rita's small bedroom and discussed what to do, their voices low and serious, weighing consequences and responsibilities. Rita, weak from her illness but remarkably clear-minded, offered the wisdom of someone who had lived long enough to understand what truly mattered. "What would Eleanor want?" she asked quietly, her thin fingers folded on the blanket. "What would honor her search rather than betray it?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. They realized with growing certainty that exposing Eleanor without her consent would be a betrayal. Just another example of someone taking from Eleanor without her permission, extracting value from her for their own purposes, whether fame or career, advancement, or even misguided compassion. But they also felt compelled to do something, felt the moral weight of simply letting her wander alone and vulnerable through an often cruel world. They could not in good conscience do nothing. Catherine made a decision, her jaw set with determination. She would write the story, documenting everything they had discovered, but she would not publish it yet. Instead, she would try to find Eleanor and give her a choice. Present her with the truth and let her decide what happened next. It was the only path that honored both the story and the woman at its center. While the women searched, the video continued its viral spread, reaching numbers that climbed into the tens of millions, crossing international borders, appearing on news broadcasts from Tokyo to London to São Paulo. But something had shifted. This was no longer just another viral moment destined to be forgotten by tomorrow's trending topic. Something about it touched people deeply, reached past the superficial entertainment value, into something raw and essential about the human condition. In comment sections across every platform, people began sharing their own stories of encountering homeless individuals, some admitting with profound shame that they had looked away, that they had crossed the street to avoid making eye contact, that they had judged and dismissed people based solely on appearance. Others told stories of small kindnesses shown or received, moments of connection that had stayed with them for years. The video became more than entertainment. It became a mirror, reflecting back to viewers their own choices, their own capacity for compassion or cruelty, their own complicity in a society that often treated poverty as invisibility. Churches across the country began using it in Sunday sermons, pastors drawing connections to biblical teachings about caring for the least among us. Teachers showed it in classrooms, sparking discussions about dignity, prejudice, and the difference between seeing and truly looking. The woman in pearls from the cafe, whose name was Margaret Whitmore, found herself haunted by her own mocking reaction, unable to sleep, as she replayed the moment when she had sneered at someone whose talent exceeded anything Margaret herself would ever possess. She made a substantial anonymous donation to a homeless shelter. $50,000 delivered with a note that said, "Only I am sorry." Gerald, the cafe manager who had initially demanded the old woman be sent away, implemented a new policy after witnessing the public response and wrestling with his own conscience. Any person, regardless of appearance or ability to pay, could have free water and a place to sit in the shade at Café Lumineux. He posted a sign by the entrance. Small changes rippled outward like stones thrown into still water, each creating wider and wider circles. Maya noticed people treating her differently at work, customers more grateful, more patient, more aware of her humanity rather than seeing her merely as service. But she also noticed something else during her walks through the city. More people were stopping to help those in need on the streets, offering food, water, conversation, recognition. The video had awakened something in the collective conscience, had reminded people of a fundamental truth they had forgotten or chosen to ignore. Yet Eleanor herself remained missing, a ghost moving through the city, unaware of the impact she had made, unaware that her simple act of gratitude had sparked a small revolution in human kindness. A week later, Maya was walking home from her evening shift when she saw a small crowd gathered near the Boston Common. People stopped on the sidewalk, listening to something. Her heart began to race with irrational hope. Could it be? She pushed through the small gathering of people and found an elderly man playing violin on the corner, his weathered case open for donations, his fingers moving with practiced skill across the strings despite the autumn chill that had finally broken the summer heat. But it was not the violinist that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. It was the woman sitting on a nearby bench, watching him with quiet attention. Eleanor. She was wearing different clothes, a navy cardigan instead of the faded dress, her hair covered with a different scarf, but it was unmistakably her. The same dignified posture, the same sharp, observant eyes, the same indefinable quality of contained grace. Maya froze on the sidewalk, unsure what to do, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. She watched, barely breathing, as Eleanor rose from the bench and approached the violinist. Eleanor dropped coins into his case, more than most passers-by offered, and said something that made the old musician look up and smile with genuine warmth, his face creasing with pleasure. Then Eleanor began to walk away, moving with that same purposeful stride Maya remembered. Surprisingly quick for her apparent age, Maya made a decision in an instant. She followed, keeping enough distance to avoid detection, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Eleanor walked with clear purpose through several neighborhoods, turning corners with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going, moving from the tourist-filled areas near the Common into quieter residential streets where old brownstones leaned against each other like tired friends. Finally, Eleanor approached a small, somewhat run-down boarding house on a side street, the kind of place that charged by the week and asked few questions. She climbed the front steps and disappeared inside. Maya stood across the street, breathing hard, and carefully noted the address in her phone. She had found her. The woman the entire world was searching for was living right here, in this forgotten corner of Boston. Now came the infinitely harder question, the one that made Maya's hands shake as she stared at her phone. What should she do? She thought of Catherine, waiting for any lead, ready to write the story of a lifetime. She thought of her mother, Rita, invested now in this mystery that had briefly brought her back to life. She thought of the story that could be told, the impact it could have, but she also remembered Eleanor's eyes in that first encounter, that searching quality, that sense of someone testing something profound and essential. She remembered the feeling that kindness itself was being weighed and measured. Maya pulled out her phone, Catherine's number already cued, her thumb hovering over the call button. Maya called Catherine immediately, her voice shaking as she explained what she had found, where Eleanor was living. They talked for over an hour, weighing options and ethics, discussing what it meant to respect someone's autonomy while also caring about their well-being. Together, they decided to approach Eleanor directly, to offer her a choice rather than make one for her, to honor her agency even as they revealed what they knew. The next morning, Maya returned to the boarding house with Catherine beside her, both women nervous and uncertain, but driven by conviction that this was the right path. They knocked on the landlord's door, a peeling green thing that had once been beautiful but now spoke only of deferred maintenance and tight budgets. The landlord who answered was a tired woman in her 60s named Mrs. Chen, her face lined with years of hard work and harder choices. When they asked which room Eleanor rented, Mrs. Chen's expression immediately became protective, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "The old lady in room 7? She is quiet, pays on time, keeps to herself. Why do you want to know?" Catherine explained carefully and honestly, not sensationalizing but not hiding the truth either. Speaking of Eleanor's identity, the viral video, the search that had consumed the internet. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened with each revelation, her hand rising to her mouth. But after a long moment, she nodded slowly. "I will ask if she will see you. Wait here." 5 minutes felt like hours as Maya and Catherine stood in the dim hallway, surrounded by the smell of old cooking and the distant sound of a television playing too loud. Then Mrs. Chen returned, her expression unreadable. "She says you can come up. Room 7, top of the stairs." The room was tiny, perhaps 10 feet by 12, but it was immaculate. A single bed with hospital corners, a small table with a hot plate, books stacked neatly on a makeshift shelf, and Eleanor, sitting in a worn armchair by the window, afternoon light falling across her face, looking entirely unsurprised by their arrival. "Hello, Maya," she said softly, her voice carrying that same refined tone Maya remembered, no longer masked by hoarseness or thirst. "I wondered if you would find me." Catherine stepped forward, professional instinct taking over. "I am Catherine Morrison, ma'am. I am a reporter with the Boston Globe. And I have been trying to find you because—" But Eleanor raised one hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence. "I know who you are, Miss Morrison. I have read your work for years. You are better than most. More thoughtful, more interested in truth than sensation." She gestured to 2 folding chairs leaning against the wall. "Please, sit. I assume you have questions." Eleanor told her story without prompting, without hesitation, as if she had been waiting for years to tell someone who would truly understand. She spoke of the hollow years of fame, of standing on the world's greatest stages to thunderous applause while feeling utterly alone, of her husband Thomas's sudden death that shattered whatever meaning her career had held. Everyone wanted the voice, she said, her eyes distant with memory. The voice, the fame, the reflected glory of being associated with Eleanor Hartwell. Agents wanted their percentage. Opera houses wanted sold-out performances. Patrons wanted to say they knew me. Critics wanted to build their reputations by praising or destroying me. But me? Eleanor? The woman beneath all of that? She was invisible. No one wanted her. No one even saw her. She described her 20-year journey with quiet precision, the experiments in human kindness that had taken her to dozens of cities, hundreds of encounters. "I have been treated with cruelty you could not imagine," she said quietly, her hands folding in her lap. "I have been invisible so many times, looked through as if I did not exist, that I wondered if I had actually become a ghost. I have been called terrible names, had food thrown at me, been chased away from storefronts by people who saw only an inconvenience, a blight on their perfect neighborhoods. Each rejection confirmed what I feared most, that genuine compassion had died, that humanity had lost whatever goodness it once possessed. But then, she looked directly at Maya, and her expression softened completely, tears gathering in her eyes. And then, on a scorching day in Boston, a young woman with problems of her own, a young woman who was exhausted and struggling and had every reason to protect herself first, saw me, not what I could give her, not my voice or my fame or my money, because she knew nothing of those things, just me, a thirsty old woman who needed water. Tears slipped down Eleanor's weathered cheeks, catching the afternoon light. You gave me what I had been searching for all these years, child, proof that it still exists in this world. Real kindness, unthinking generosity, the kind that asks nothing in return, the kind my husband used to show to everyone he met, the kind that made me fall in love with him in the first place. Eleanor reached out and took Maya's hand in both of her own, holding it gently. You gave me back my faith in humanity. You reminded me why I loved people enough to sing for them in the first place. And that, dear Maya, is worth more than all the standing ovations I ever received. Catherine explained the viral video carefully, describing how it had spread across the world, the millions of views, the endless speculation about the mystery singer's identity. She spoke of the impact it was having, the conversations it was sparking, the small acts of kindness rippling outward from that single moment. Eleanor listened with an unreadable expression, her face a careful mask that revealed nothing of her thoughts. I did not mean to cause such a commotion, she said finally, her voice soft. I just wanted to thank Maya. It was an impulse, a moment of gratitude, nothing more. Catherine then reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder, placing it gently on the small table between them. This is your story, Miss Hartwell. I have spent the past week researching and writing it. I believe it matters deeply. I believe it could inspire millions of people, could change how we see each other, could remind us of what truly matters in this world. But it is your story, not mine. It is yours to control. I will not publish one single word without your explicit permission. Eleanor took the folder with trembling hands and began to read slowly, her eyes moving across Catherine's elegant prose. Tears formed again as she saw her life laid out on the pages, her pain and her search given shape and meaning. The article did not sensationalize or exploit. It honored her search, her profound loneliness, her husband's death, her discovery that kindness still existed. It was beautiful and true. If this publishes, Eleanor said slowly, setting down the pages, my experiment ends. People will know who I am. I cannot keep searching. I cannot keep testing humanity if everyone recognizes me. Maya spoke up then, her voice gentle but firm with conviction. Maybe your search is over. Maybe you found what you needed. Maybe the answer is yes, kindness still exists, and you do not need to keep looking. And maybe now, people need to hear about it. The video already changed things. People are kinder. They are paying attention. Your story, your whole story, could do even more. It could show people why kindness matters and what it means to someone who receives it. Eleanor looked between the two women, one who had shown her kindness when it cost her something, one who had honored her story when she could have exploited it. She thought of Thomas, of his gentle smile, of what he would say in this moment. She could almost hear his voice. Tell them, Eleanor. Let them know. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly. You may publish it. Catherine's article published 3 days later in the Boston Globe, but it was simultaneously released online where it immediately began breaking every internet record the publication had ever seen. The search for kindness. The 20-year journey of Eleanor Hartwell was not a sensational exposé written to capitalize on tragedy or suffering. It was a meditation on fame and loss, on human connection and isolation, on the power of simple goodness in a world that had grown cynical and transactional. Catherine had written with profound respect and elegant restraint, capturing Eleanor's pain without exploiting it, honoring her search without diminishing it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Eleanor agreed to one interview and only one, filmed at Café Lumineux, where it all began, sitting at the same outdoor table where Maya had brought her water on that scorching afternoon that now felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. The cameras captured everything. The dappled shade from the umbrella, the quiet dignity in Eleanor's weathered face, the way her hands rested calmly on the table where they had once trembled with thirst and exhaustion. She spoke eloquently about her journey, about the 20 years of testing humanity, about the cruelty and the rare moments of grace. "I had everything the world values," she said, looking directly into the camera with those sharp, searching eyes. "Money beyond measure, fame that followed me everywhere, admiration from millions of people, but I was starving for something so much simpler, something that cannot be bought or demanded or performed for applause. I was starving to be seen as a person, worthy of kindness, for no other reason than that I was human and in need." The interview was watched by millions within hours of its release, shared across every platform, discussed in homes and offices and classrooms around the world. Maya sat beside Eleanor throughout, visibly uncomfortable with the attention, her hands folded tightly in her lap, but present because Eleanor had specifically requested her presence. When the interviewer turned to Maya and asked what the experience had taught her, Maya answered with characteristic simplicity, "I did not do anything special. I just did what anyone should do. That is what makes this so important. We should all be seeing each other, really seeing each other, recognizing the humanity in every person we encounter, regardless of how they look or what they can offer us in return." The ending came swiftly but satisfyingly, like the final notes of a perfect symphony resolving into silence. The article and interview sparked a global movement that surprised even Catherine with its scope and sincerity. Kindness challenges began trending on social media. But these were not the performative gestures that usually dominated such campaigns. These were genuine acts of service for those in need, documented not for praise but for inspiration, shared not for likes but to encourage others. Eleanor established a foundation, funded by the return of some of her liquidated assets that had been held in trust, dedicated to supporting working-class people who showed extraordinary kindness in their daily lives. Maya was the first recipient. Her mother's medical bills were paid in full. Every single crushing invoice cleared, allowing Rita to receive the treatment she desperately needed without the weight of financial destruction. Eleanor also created scholarships for young opera singers from modest backgrounds, insisting with fierce conviction that talent mattered infinitely more than pedigree or connections. But the most important change was quieter, more personal. Eleanor returned to music. Not to the grand opera houses where she had once reigned, but to smaller venues, homeless shelters, hospitals, places where people needed beauty most desperately. She sang for audiences who had never attended an opera, who had never imagined that such sublime art could be offered freely to them. Catherine's career flourished beyond her expectations, but she made a conscious choice to continue writing stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary good, using her platform to shine light on unsung heroes. Maya stayed at Café Lumineux but was promoted to manager, and she immediately implemented a sweeping policy. Anyone in need, regardless of appearance or ability to pay, would receive water, food, and most importantly, dignity. Gerald, surprisingly, became one of the program's strongest supporters. His own heart fundamentally changed by witnessing true goodness triumph over prejudice. 6 months later, Eleanor performed at a benefit concert for homeless services. The theater was packed, every seat filled with people who had followed her story, who had been moved by her search. But before she sang a single note, Eleanor called Maya onto the stage. Maya walked forward reluctantly, overwhelmed by the attention, and Eleanor presented her with a simple gift, a delicate glass pendant shaped like a water drop that caught the stage lights and scattered them like tiny stars. "Thank you," Eleanor said, her voice carrying effortlessly to the farthest balcony with that legendary projection. "For reminding me that kindness is the truest form of wealth, more valuable than all the gold in all the world." The audience rose in immediate standing ovation, tears visible on countless faces. Eleanor turned to them, that mysterious knowing smile playing across her weathered features, and began to sing. Her voice, that impossibly beautiful instrument that had survived 2 decades of wandering and testing, filled the theater with sound so pure it seemed to transcend the physical world. And everyone listening understood in that moment. They were not just hearing a performance, not just witnessing the return of a legend. They were hearing living proof that in a world that often seemed cruel and transactional and indifferent to suffering, genuine goodness still existed, still flourished, still had the power to change everything.